to Bare and Aware. This space is about raw remembrance, body-led leadership, and creating from your truest self. Today's guest, Jocelyn Vance, is a certified life and success coach who's built 3 multi-six-figure businesses in 3 different niches. As an intuitive business and identity coach, the Conscious Woman works with soul-led entrepreneurs and purpose-driven visionaries. In today's episode, we talked about unbecoming, awakening, and what it really takes to embody your next level of truth in life, relationships, business, and self-expression. Welcome, Jocelyn. I am so excited to have you here on the Bare and Aware podcast. So, to begin, tell me more about how you developed to be the conscious woman. What is the journey that took you here?
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I love doing these because it's like I just get to respond and do all the things. It's my jam. So, okay, the conscious woman. Oh, Lord, that is a loaded question. But I will say it has been, I would say, obviously, when we think about our lifetime, it's like an ever evolving space of our soul that is continuously moving, gaining the lessons we need to gain, awakening the things we need to awaken. But the conscious woman really came about over the course of probably the past decade. It's been more than a decade, let's be real. But I would say when I first started really anchoring in as adult, my spiritual awakening, waking up from the matrix, waking up from all the programming, which is still ever evolving, right? I mean, there's programming in there right now. I know that's going to be awakened in the next, probably tomorrow. But it was really started in 2006 when I just started really feeling. I was teaching full time at the time. I had done the whole like be a perfect girl, straight A's, get the degree, get your master's degree, and climb up the ladder in the education field. And I was sitting in a standardized test, and I was sitting there and I was reading a book that my mom gave me, actually, called Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but I was like, oh my God, this is it. Oh my God. I just felt like all these things come through. And then after that, I was like, boom, 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 boom. And I would say the next initiation was when I got a divorce in 2012, going into 2013. And I was sitting in a therapy office for the first time pretty much ever from that realm of things. And she's like, do you know that you've been a victim of narcissistic mental abuse for the past 10 years? And I was like, what? Like, one of those moments where you see someone's mouth moving. It's like in the movies, like you see someone's mouth moving, and I'm like, oh crap, what? And at that time, I didn't 100% understand it, but that sent me on a journey to hire my first life coach. And I had been longing for, like, I'm meant for more. Something I'm meant for more than just this public school classroom with middle school children who don't give a rip about what I'm talking about. I knew I had more purpose. I knew there was something calling me. And sitting in that first life coach session was like, this is it. This is who I'm meant to be. And so I went on to get my life coach certification and then started a journey, entrepreneurship, running my own business on the side of teaching, leaving teaching, which was a whole nother initiation of identity shift. And it's just been one thing after another since then that I would say it would be initiation after initiation and identity shift after identity shift. And then coming into a space of just feeling, even owning like spiritual gifts that I think I've had for a very long time, but didn't really understand them, feeling higher level in consciousness than my peers, than people that I had been around, but I didn't understand it. I always kind of chalked it up to being hypervigilant is what I would call it, but came into a space of realizing like I'm actually pretty spiritually gifted, a very highly intuitive, borderline psychic on many levels. And I didn't really want to own that word for the longest time, but it's coming into that and realizing that I just had an awareness about me and the way that I started moving and leading myself. And then it kind of went into this whole space of like, okay, now like if this is a gift, then how do I like impact with it? How do I have other people that maybe aren't necessarily at this level yet, or they want to be at this level. But it became a brand where I really started awakening people by being basically a mirror of truth and authenticity, and working with clients and friends and family. It's just like that became just who I was like an awakener of authenticity, of truth, unshedding unconscious shadows and subconscious identities that were no longer, of what they were really being called to, like a soul stirring was happening. And then just now, what I do is in the Conscious Woman brand, and my husband is the conscious man. He also coaches men, and then we have the conscious couple that we have this umbrella brand, and it's more about just basically shifting your identity, unbecoming all the things that you're not truly, and getting in alignment with your soul aligned self, amplifying your gifts, standing in authentic truth, and living out your purpose and having really juicy connection and conscious relationship with your partner. And so that's kind of the journey and where I'm at now. And oh man, there's so many things I could go down, but overall that's the evolution. And what I do now is just really awaken consciousness in others to come back more to who they truly are.
And that's so beautiful. I love how you mentioned all these different initiations, like the
Yeah.
divorce, right? And the moment in school and the book. And what you said several times is that process of unbecoming. So unbecoming, it's not comfortable, right? It's going outside of the comfort
Exactly.
zone, outside of the cage. So can you take us to a moment of unbecoming and give us the somatic experience of what it felt like to be in your body as you went through your unbecoming?
Oh man, I've had so many. It's crazy. But since I've already talked about the divorce, I'll kind of go into even a further layer into unbecoming that really catapulted my purpose and how I operate in partnership with my now husband, who's my absolute soulmate. But I met him in 2014. We started dating, and I was a single mom. I was drowning in debt because my ex husband left me with credit cards that were in my name that I had no idea existed. And I just had so much shift going on. But when I met him, it was like this like energy and everything. But then it was like one of those things where it's like there are still so many layers that we had to grow through. And then he had to grow through. And so there was a moment when I was almost looking at a second divorce. I had gone and flown out to Colorado in 2018 to get my NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and life and success coach certifications. And I was out there for a month. And I was doing so much work on ourselves. But prior to that, we had gone through so much, like where you just, it's like you can see that you're mirroring each other. There's wounds that are at play. There's so many other layers. And being out there, I had this epiphany moment that I was at the actual cause of almost everything that was happening, although he had to take responsibility for his role in it and the codependency and the mirror of matching. It was like, no, look at complete ownership of why you're attracting all these men that need fixing in our projects. Why are you attracting friends that you constantly are having to pour into? And it's always this outpour and outgiving. And so it was a moment of like, it's hard to describe, but it's like another one of those awakening moments where you're like, holy shit, like I see myself. And so I went hard to work on a lot of wounded masculine energy that I was carrying, a lot of protective mechanisms, a lot of control, perfectionism, needing to fix, needing to save. And then that kind of really created the foundation of some of my brand today, where I always say, like, you are a lighthouse, you're a leader and not a boat navigator. And for so long, I was a boat navigator trying to get people to rise or awaken or get to the light. I would try and bring people to the light by being their boat navigator. And that was in all realms of my life. And that's not how you actually are meant to walk this planet, right? It's like as light leaders, we're here to be lighthouses. We're here to fuel ourselves, we're here to love ourselves, we're here to heal ourselves and then shine light out. And then people who are meant to be in our world, people are meant to, the soul contracts that we have, the people that we're meant to serve and our purpose and the partnerships that we're meant to have will be activated by us, and they will come to the light, in our power, in our standards, in our boundaries. And I had gone about it the whole wrong way. I was trying to share my light and my gifts by trying to be the boat navigator and essentially enabling situations and really burning myself the fuck out, to be completely honest. And so I started doing work around that and setting real high standards and boundaries for myself, really pouring in self-love. And in that, my husband got kicked out of the house. And it was probably one of the hardest times, but it actually then, because I was no longer a boat navigator, then he started actually doing the work himself. I didn't need to be the awakener of him. He started
Wow.
really having a dark night of the soul, and he started really like seeking himself and sleeping in the Krager parking lot 10 miles from our house, really had a moment of holy shit for himself. And so when I raised the standard, when I was the light, instead of trying to continuously be the awakener and the enabler, he rose and he started doing his own work, and I just let him, and I watched, and I just stood in my power. I stood in my standard. And in that, I watched him rise into one of the most powerful men that have yet to know in this moment, and standing here today. But it's been a journey. But I think that's it. It's like one of the most profound things is when you can realize that you are the conscious creator of your life. And when we can take ownership and see that our external reality is simply a reflection of our internal state of being, and we go to work there first, and then we hold a different standard and we become the lighthouse, everything in our life changes. People will fall away, you'll trigger people, but at the end of the day, that's not our responsibility.
That landed so deeply. As a healer, I feel like many healers experience that. They have the gifts, they have that desire to help people, they feel the empathy. And then they start to go into that boat navigator role, trying to help. And we see potential in people. We see, okay, if you just do this, you tune your energy this way, this is possible for you. But we can't help people who don't want, who are not open to transformation. And I also have a narcissist in my family, and it's difficult because it's like you want to help, but then you helping is actually giving them what they want, which is manipulation and all the attention and everything. So I would love to hear your view of how would you coach someone going through that? Someone who's maybe in that energy of wanting to help everyone, wanting to be the boat navigator and lead them to be the lighthouse.
Yeah, it's an unlayering process, but and we can get in the weeds of making it feel so huge. And oh my God, I need to unbecome all these things, or I need to do so much work. And although it is work, it's really just at one point just a decision that you're no longer going to be available for a certain realm of relating, a certain realm of being. And our subconscious mind, as you know, it's like 95% of what we do is on autopilot, and there's so many unconscious shadows at play. And so this is like the point of my whole brand, right? Is becoming more conscious of who you are being, more conscious of your thoughts, your belief systems, your patterns, your stories, anything that's going on in your external reality. Becoming more conscious, looking in the mirror more, asking yourself higher level questions, and hiring a mentor. I mean, I obviously in 2013 hired my first life coach, and I haven't had a day since then that I didn't have some sort of level of mentorship. And it's because we always are going to be in evolution. And when you can hire somebody that can see things and awaken you faster and bring them to the forefront, that is a powerful space, because we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And we're operating so much from that unconscious and subconscious realm of being that being able to awaken is the first step, And I always say in my coaching, like, it's a process, right? It's like we first awaken, because you have to awaken to what's actually happening and going on to be able to move or do anything different. And then we go into the alignment process. And I always say the alignment process is like a mind, body, soul process of alignment, because you're aligning your frequency with who you truly are. You're aligning your frequency with your next level identity. You're aligning your frequency with what and who you are truly meant to become. And so in that, there's a lot of unbecoming. There's a lot of debunking certain levels of the mind, which the mind, is subconscious identity, is the programmings, the patterns, is the habits that we run. And then it comes down into the body, which is somatics, which is breath work, which is meditation, which is really anchoring into listening to your body. To be honest with you, for the longest time, I would bypass this part. I had the consciousness and I had the mind and I had all this stuff going on, but I would completely bypass deep emotions that were suppressed, and they're in our body. Like, it's like something conscious we don't even understand. It's in our nervous system. So really aligning your frequency from an energetic space and healing in that way. And then it's a soul ascension. I have a membership called the Ascension, and it's literally just like continuously the ascension of yourself to be able to be at the conscious seat of your awareness and know that life doesn't give us what we want, it gives us what we need to grow, and everything that is coming in is for us and not happening to us. And when we can operate from that space, then we start attracting different. But people think like, oh, that's the last step. Like, oh, I'm attracting different, so I've arrived and I'm attracting different. It's like, no, that's actually the step that then is like, okay, then you have to be held accountable to not self-sabotage, to not have upper limit things going on, to actually be a receiver of what you're attracting, which is that final piece. And then when you do that on repetition enough, your identity shifts and you start really gaining evidence, which then creates momentum. Then you actually get to really shift. So I take my clients through the awaken, the align, the attract, and then the accountability process that creates true ascension to another level of identity.
Mm, I absolutely love that. And I love the part that you said at the beginning of your journey, you were ignoring the body, the somatic signs. And I feel like when people first get into spirituality, you have the meditation and you focus mostly on the upper chakras, like the third eye and the crown, and it's connecting with something bigger than yourself. But then oftentimes there's sort of an imbalance, right? Because you're focusing here, you're developing here, but then you have the human experience and all of the feelings and repressed emotions inside the body.
It's funny because I would bypass that. Like, I would bypass it to consciousness. And I think when we're elevated women and
Mhm.
we're operating from a level of consciousness, sometimes that can obviously be very powerful. But for me, I would like not even anchor in the feelings. If somebody hurt me or something, it would be like, oh, I see them. I know this has nothing to do with me. This is their inner child. We can get in this whole space where like
Mhm.
bypass how people are treating us due to being able to see them, quote unquote. But it's like, no, like this still feels some kind of way to me, even though we can see people and we know that it's not necessarily to us, it still feels and it's still hurtful. And I would just bypass the emotion completely to consciousness. And in that, I was just suppressing and suppressing and suppressing and then self abandoning in the process because I would always then just go want to help them or
Mm.
pour into them, even though they're the ones that hurt me. And so it's just like a self abandonment of savior complex, essentially. It's
Mm.
just a lack of self love. But yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so it's beautiful, like that focus back on yourself. And another thing about the coaching, like you mentioned that you first started working with a coach and then you went through this journey and you haven't been without a coach since then. And for me, I don't know if you can relate, but in growing up, I was always really independent, like hyper independent. And I could do everything by myself. I didn't need anyone. I was studying, I was reading, I was good at the things that I did. And coaching was kind of repulsive to me. I was like, mm, I don't need that, right? Like I don't need like another person. I can do everything by myself. And first of all, looking out and seeking a coach and entering into a coach relationship, it's actually breaking down that ego barrier, which is also one of the first steps to awakening. It's like, okay, I don't have the answers, and I'm going to be vulnerable and open for reflection with someone else. And me too. When I started investing in coaching, it became something really, really nourishing for my mind, for my body, for everything, just to have that reflection in that mirror and a person seeing me in my power and seeing my
Yeah.
potential, which we don't always get from our circles of friends.
100%. It's so real. And I agree. And I just did a little training in this the other day. I think it was yesterday actually, where it's like you can only perceive and receive from the awareness that you have. And a lot of that, like we said, it's programmed. It's so many different things. So when you elevate yourself in a room with somebody who can see you a little bit even higher than you can see yourself, one, because they've probably been through it, grown through it. Maybe they've elevated in their awareness of what they're mentoring in. And I know there's a lot of back and forth in the industry too around just being really good marketers versus being really good coaches. So I think there's a discerning of who that person truly is. But when you get into an environment where it's truly a soul ascension and a contract that you have with that person, and they're able to see you truly and able to see what's going on, and then you get in rooms with people that are at a level that you want to be at versus continuously surrounding yourself with circles that are keeping you the same, keeping your comfort zone, keeping you complacent, or even just their thought processes and how they view the world, that deeply is impactful. Because when you can get around people that can elevate you to become more of who you truly are, your highest potential, we could use all different kinds of words to express that, your highest self, whatever. But when you're in rooms that can continuously activate that level of you, it's like you take 10 years of life experience that typically wakes us up or knocks us down, and then you condense it into this short period of time where you're just getting activated and awakened so much quicker. So yeah, I'm always very conscious and intentional about where I put my time and attention, where I put my focus, where I allow myself to go, and what rooms I decide to ultimately be in, and then therefore obviously seek out advice or the way that I want to view the world, who I want to become. There's a fine line, because there's sometimes where you get caught in situations where you could go seek advice or lean on a friend or whatever, and sometimes their view of the world and their perspective, even family, you love them to death, but at the end of the day, if they're not going where you're going, if they don't have the relationship that you desire, if they're not working in this space and the business and building their purpose and at the abundance levels you desire, probably not the people that you want to necessarily consult, unless they have some level of consciousness to be able to support you for you being you. So that's been an involvement and journey too. I've lost a lot of friends as I've come on this ascension path and become more and more aligned and conscious in myself. I've had to go through a lot of loss, and that's kind of the point of it. Unfortunately, it can feel hard and lonely sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's like when you're a lighthouse, you're not a boat navigator. People will be activated and rise. Some people will be triggered and they'll be out there in the ocean, like getting whipped by the waves, and you just have to let them and still shine your light, right?
Mm-hmm. So true. And you mentioned that resistance can show up through fear of judgment or rejection. So, what advice would you give someone that kind of is in that phase? It's someone going through their big transformation, their big rebirth, and they
Yeah.
are at a level where maybe they can't really relate to their friends or family anymore, because of that fear of being judged or rejected. What advice could you give them?
Oh, this is a hard place to be in. I'm not gonna lie. Like I would say it's probably one of the hardest places when you first are starting to shift in your identity and you're raising your frequency and your consciousness level to the next level, whatever that looks like. It's always a next level, right? We're never arrived. We're on this planet until we leave it, and we're still not fully alive. We'll come back multiple times over, I'm sure. But it's coming to a space where when you're in this gap, when you're in the void, I call it the void. It's like that space where you're shifting and everything's kind of falling away. So imagine just a boomerang that's happening, right? So you're in the pullback, and you're in the pullback and everything's falling away, and it feels very tense. It feels there's a lot going on. This is when it's the hardest to stand in that next level of who you are, because the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of loss, the fear of losing love, the fear of people not understanding us, the fear of not being chosen. Those are deep seated fears, and they come from obviously deep seated unconscious shadows, whether that be shame, whether that be not good enoughness, whether that be a space where we just want to feel good enough, included, loved. And at the end of the day, that work comes back to ourselves. And when we can come back into truth of ourself and authenticity within ourself, and understanding that if you're showing up in a certain way to be liked or chosen, or you're showing up in a certain way that's filtered through who you truly are, your soul can't actually feel loved, chosen, accepted, desired anyway, because you know that you're not being your authentic self. You know that you're performing, or you're people pleasing, or you're overgiving, or you're showing up in a way to not lose something. So the resistance of holding on, it creates this actually a turmoil within ourselves, and we don't consciously recognize this. So there's a lot of movement towards it, but you can't ever feel it. So even if you got it, you would still feel something's missing, or I don't actually feel how I thought this would feel, because at the end of the day, you can only ever give yourself that. And when you do, in that void space, and you continue to lead yourself back into self-love, self empowerment, coming into who you truly are in authenticity, and you start standing in that more and more. And at the beginning, it's not going to be easy, but it's the more it's almost like building a muscle in the gym. When you first go to the gym, it's like you start lifting, you're like, oh my God, I'm sore. This hurts. This is painful. This sucks. I can't sit on the toilet. You're like bracing yourself every time. And that's what it feels like. But the more you do it and the more you get in there, the more confident you get, the more you start flexing the muscle. And then you start feeling good about yourself, and you start feeling like, I can do this. And in that, you start attracting people that reflect that. And then you get to actually feel what you've been chasing for so long, but been in the avoidance of it. And so that is, it's a process, but the void space is probably one of the hardest when you're shifting frequencies and levels of consciousness and identity shifting, because at the end of the day, you're becoming a new person, and the old person has to die, and that ego does not like that. And we want to feel certain things, and we move to make sure that we don't feel bad and we feel protected so we don't feel pain. But in reality, that is the freedom. That's like our brand of living conscious and free, because when you can live conscious to what's actually going on and stand in your truth, you actually create freedom. But it starts within. It all is a journey within. No, you can't ever be chosen unless you choose yourself. You can't ever be truly loved unless you're actually loving yourself, and you become love and authentic expression. And when you do that, then you actually get to feel it. And your soul's like, oh, okay, we're being chosen for who we truly are, not for some curated version of ourselves to be it. So it's not an easy process, but the more that you can just take little steps at a time and build that muscle, you start seeing your external results start coming in even more. And then the more evidence you have, the more your brain believes, and you gain momentum. And then you really actually have a quantum leap sometimes in the process. And sometimes it's slow. It's just a shift. And in that shift, there's so much more magic, because you know that you're actually attracting from who you truly are.
And that's what happened with your story, right? With your husband. You changed, you started expressing more of your real self, and he rose to meet you, right? So that was that experience of actually magnetizing the results that you want through being your authentic self.
Yeah, and you have to, on some levels, be unattached to the outcome, right? Because had I been attached to what he did or didn't do in that moment, then I would have still been participating in being a boat navigator. I would have still been participating in a space that was not actually aligned and true. And that's why it worked, in the sense that I was no longer attached. What he chose to do with his self and his life was no longer my responsibility, and I didn't make it mine. But it was like I set him free to become who he was truly meant to be. And in that, he rose. And some people will, and some people won't. Even in our business, when you're shifting, some people are so afraid to shift in their message and how they're showing up and being seen, because they fear being rejected, or they feel getting canceled online, or they fear not getting it right, and all these things. And sometimes you have a full-blown business. I mean, I had a multi-six-figure business, and I burned it all to the ground and shifted. Why? Because it no longer was aligned. But getting really good at doing that without the attachment, and releasing the fears of it, and becoming who you truly are meant to be. And on the other side of that, it's like so much magic. But had he not, we wouldn't be together today, and who knows where we'd be. But I can tell you right now, I know where I would be. I would be continuing to move and attract and be a magnet for what was meant for my soul in that next ascension. And I'm just fortunate that he did. And now we get to have this beautiful relationship, and he obviously did. And then he went and got the same certifications I have, and now he coaches men. And to see that work and to see his transformation due to this, the igniting of me becoming the lighthouse, it sent him on a path of deep transformation on his own. And that's the ripple effect that we have. That's the impact that we truly have. Because we can sit here and say we could impact somebody by, transforming them and helping them and coaching and guiding them. But literally in my coaching, I am the activator of a mirror. I am the activator of one's truth and coming into their actual true self. And in that, magic happens, but I'm not attached. I'm not attached to needing them to be something for me, needing my clients to get a transformation so I look good as a coach, needing anybody to do anything besides what they're meant to do in their soul's journey to do. And in that, we actually have way more impact because that ripple effect. And now he coaches tons of men. He's coached 100 men around the world. And the impact that he has just from our relationship and me going first in some ways was beautiful. I've had that with friends too. Some people will rise and some won't, but you can't be attached to who does and who doesn't. That's their soul's journey. And when we make it our own, we sabotage ourselves.
And when you give the other person the personal responsibility, it gives them an ability to rise and say, yes, I am capable of that. I am going to tune into this frequency, and I'm doing this for me. Because as soon as you try to manipulate the outcome, and as you said, try to be the savior, the boat navigator, the other person will be dependent on you. So it's actually not going to help them. Like, we're trying to help, but it's actually doing more harm than help.
Yeah, and this is in all the relationships of our life. Obviously, even as coaches and healers and mentors, it's like having a client and create a codependency versus an activation of power and truth and empowerment back to their self. I see so much of this in the coaching industry, or there's wound matching happening. It's like the most powerful thing you can do as a coach and a healer is come back into your own healing and your own truth and your own self, because there's a lot of that kind of dynamic that can easily happen in a coach mentor type relationship as well. But it definitely happens in partnership. It's like creating those codependency, the wound mirrors, the wound matching. It's like really going to work on yourself. And like I've said, like becoming the conscious, aware person who can actually see what's happening and create and move and be the lighthouse. Because yes, you're right. Boat navigator is an enabler. And in enabling, it serves us. And it served me for a very long time to be in that role because my wounds really loved it. And the space that I was operating from really got served there until it was no longer available. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. And when I had to really look at my role in it, because we think we're elevated or higher conscious or moving in a way that's heart led or moving in a way that we're so loving and we're so this and so that. And all of those things are very true. But when you can look at yourself and take complete ownership that you're playing a role that is actually serving the wounded version of you and not actually being a powerful leader to shine light to where you're actually activating people to rise into their own power just by who you're being and the embodiment of your own light leadership, that and love, essentially, that's where actual power exists. And when you can alchemize shadows that are keeping you in codependent situations, whether that be as a coach, as a partner, as a friend, as a family member, that's when you set yourself and the other person free truly, and you actually have impact and the ripple effect that you see your soul seeking.
You also talk about alchemizing shadows into power and then embodying that as your personal brand. So how would that look like in marketing, on just the way that you show up when you market from your evolving self?
I always say, like, marketing to me can be a skill or it can just be a literally embodied activation of your truth. And I tend to lean towards that. I know that when I just show up in my embodied truth And we get into this space where I think there's a lot of people that are in the marketing game that can market a message or can show up with flashy hooks and gimmicks, and then you get in their world and it's like you didn't actually get what you thought you were getting. And there's a lot of that happening, and there's a lot of really great marketers. But for me, it's like the marketing of embodied truth and what's actually alive in myself, in my life, and sharing that message, it will touch the right people. And I always trust that the right people that are meant for me and the soul contracts I have on this planet, where I'm meant to be a guide and a light for people who are in that space of awakening, in that space of building a purpose driven business, in that space of wanting more healthy, clean, deeply connected, and intimate relationship. Those people who are meant for that will find me through just the resonance of me living in my truth, me standing in that. But I will be honest, like marketing what I do has been a little bit of a challenge in different points, because you feel like you have to keep up with the marketing message, or how do I bring all the power and all the knowledge to the forefront in a Instagram reel where you're flipping your hair and doing cheesy shit. And I think at the end of the day, it's just like when you're really just showing up and being embodied and not trying to curate something, not trying to please, not trying to get, not trying to be out here selling yourself, but more so just being in your actual soul aligned embodied truth. That's when a frequency happens of authenticity, which is one of the highest frequencies. And people feel that. And so I think that's one of the most powerful things in marketing yourself in that way. And when we're talking about alchemizing shadows, it's like, what does that actually look like in an embodied space? And telling stories around you leading yourself in that, and what the message and the movement actually then forms is an ever evolving truth that you exude. And I think there's so many purpose driven solopreneurs really doing light workers doing their work that are caught up in the mix of the head game and the ego game, and trying to appear a certain way to get something. And when you can really come back into true soul passion, true soul message, and journey and embodiment, that's when the actual magnetism and magic actually happens, because you can't avoid the soul contract. And we're all here. I mean, I've hired mentors that I feel were definitely activators in soul contracts, and I've hired mentors that they just sold me a really great package. And call it manipulation. I don't think it's on purpose, but there's different levels where we're trying to be something versus who are we actually. And so now I work with a lot of women building in their conscious entrepreneurship and their business to actually come back into that, come back into true soul alignment, embodied leadership, truth, and then show up in content and marketing from that message. And in that, magic and miracles just happen.
It's really such a journey, right? Because it's not just the personal brand and marketing, but you're bringing the soul and the soul contract and authenticity. So, can you paint a picture of what that looks like for your clients? I'm sure it's not just getting more views on their reels. What are the transformations that they're experiencing that might not be direct outcomes?
Yeah, so obviously I always say for the longest time what is my niche? Am I a business coach, a relationship coach? I mean, when I first started, I was a health coach. So I've had all these different pathways where one, I literally was just in that season of leading myself and working through it myself. And then it became the double mission where it's I go through it and then I give back on the other end of it. And what I lead myself through in my embodiment of truth, I give back in that way. So when I'm working with clients, it's really diving in. And obviously, with my intuitive superpowers, whatever, I can see what's running in the background behind the thing, behind the thing. And so it's really pulling those things forward. But then obviously walking someone through that process of coming back to truth, coming back to who they truly are, their journey, their embodied space, and pulling out their soul's message. what I do is so far beyond business coaching, right? And so that puts me in a box that doesn't fit. Relationship coach, well, that doesn't put me in a box that fits. And so I really just started owning the fact that I was an intuitive identity alchemist. I'm a truth seer. I'm an oracle on this planet, really shifting levels of consciousness. And so when someone comes into my world, it's I can't really be defined to any type of title necessarily, but it's an experience. And the more that you can give people the experience of you, the more people resonate and they want to work with you. And so it's creating more experiences where you're actually living in your embodied truth and being raw and real. And the podcast, being bare and aware, right? So it's being in that space where you become truly vulnerable and expressing yourself, but it's also, why am I truly embodied? Because we can, and that's not to say you're going to be perfect, because obviously there are moments when I'm challenged to step into my leadership as a conscious woman. There's so many moments, especially when I'm launching a new program, where I'm going to be tested in every single piece of what I'm about to teach. But it's, how do you embody your truth? How do you embody your message? And do you feel not confident because you've arrived, but do you feel confident in how you lead yourself when life is lifing and things are going on where your brand is being called to have you be the leader of it? And that's where the power and journey is always in my mind, because that's when you can truly be a frequency match to what you're actually saying and teaching. When you're not, and you're showing up and there's something that's off, or there's something you're trying to showcase or trying to perform or trying to perfect, that's when you will not see people show up.
Mm-hmm. And that's so deep, and I resonate with that as well. As a coach, right? It's we go through these shadows and these challenges, and we learn and grow, so we can lead people through it. But then this requires us to embody our message, and it's really like a continuous process, not only for our clients but also for ourselves.
Oh,
And they're like along for the journey, right?
that's 100% right. And I feel like that's like what you just said is so powerful, because when we recognize that we're not perfect and we want to position ourselves, there's so many things out here, like position yourself as a professional, position yourself as the go-to person, position yourself this way or that way. But it's more so like, no, like, how are you actually truly leading yourself? How are you actually embodied in what you're saying? I always say, like, our business and our relationships, it's like a personal development program on steroids, because it's like you're going to be tested in every single way that you are not showing up, 100% aligned. And it's like, how are you consciously seeing this, operating from this, leading with emotional intelligence, mastering your communication skills, and being somebody who is embodied in that truth, and then showing up in that authentic expression? Because at the end of the day, that's the only frequency that will be a magnet to the people you're meant to work with and meant to guide. Because what's going to happen is, if you market yourself a certain way, and now we have ChatGPT, right? So it's like there's so many things you could get in there and have it say and then sound really great and make it a glorious sales page. But at the end of the day, if your frequency is not a match, you may sell someone into your container, which great, you got a quick hit. But when you're not holding people in retention because you're actually giving results, or if you're not building up a reputation through referrals because people actually come into your world and get what you say that you're going to give them, then you're not building a business. You're building a street that's going to end. And on some level will never have the impact that your soul's meant for. And why you're here on this planet, truly. So it's like, why waste your time in someone else's? Because you may get a win, you may sign a client, you may fill up a program, but at the end of the day, who you are cannot lie in those intimate spaces. So, like, putting yourself out there to get something and to have a quick win and to have a so and so K month isn't actually going to do shit if you can't be the embodied leader behind it, because it will fall. And so why not build something that is true, that is embodied, that is your passion, that's your soul's work, that is going to actually create the ripple impact that you desire and sustain a legacy long term, which is what I'm all about. And my whole brand is being the conscious woman and becoming someone who is creating love, leadership, and a legacy, because I think that's why we're all here. And as a light leader and as a light worker, I feel like we're needed more now than ever on this planet to raise the consciousness and to shine light. And when you can stand in that conviction and that truth, even if you're not convicted fully in everything, but you're standing in embodied truth and authentic expression, man, like the ripple effect that has. Being the lighthouse. Stop being a boat navigator. Stop trying to get something. Stop trying to go out and have your purpose be something that's just profit. And that's a huge thing I see in the ego land. But it's like, actually build something that is your purpose work, you're passionate about, you're embodied in, you're a leadership of, that lights your soul on fire, and that you actually feel confident that you can perform on the background as much as you can on the front end. And that's when you start building a movement.
That's so powerful, that shift from information and knowledge and perfectionism into authenticity and the actual embodiment of the message. Now anyone can sound perfect. They just type some things into ChatGPT, as you said, like the sales page or whatever, read it off, done. But now people are getting smarter. They want something that they can actually feel. They want to connect with someone and actually feel so much presence and so much truth and embodiment in the other person that it activates something within them. It activates that frequency. So I absolutely love that. So how can listeners connect with you?
Well, I am the_conscious.woman on IG. I also have the.conscious.woman on TikTok. And then I'm Jocelyn Napier Vance on Facebook. So that's the socials. I have a membership program called The Ascension. You can find it, the link in the bio. This is where I drop a daily training, a riff, activation, and then we have all kinds of other juicy things in there. I've evolved in masterclasses. That's a really great place to start my world. And then, multiple different spaces outside of that, my mastermind, my private coaching. But I would say come in, explore. Me and my husband have a podcast as well. We actually had shelved it for a little bit as we were building out different pieces of our business, but it's got about 42 episodes. They're mainly relationship heavy. We're going to actually rebrand and relaunch the podcast. So that will also be on my socials and the link in the bio if you want to start consuming some of that. But yeah, any social, like the link in the bio is going to have what's active, what's real for me. I do free master classes. I do free events as well to come in and explore more of my world. But yeah, all the social medias, the links in the bio, you can find all the things I'm doing whenever you're listening to this.
And I'll put all the links in the show notes so the listeners can find you. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and we'll talk soon.